Okay, so welcome to today's session. So today we have with us Professor John Donnellan. So John Donnellan is an associate professor and chair of the management department at the New Jersey City University School of Business. He is a two-time Fulbright Fellow Scholar conducting research on cooperative education between Finland and the US. And he also recently presented a paper on pedagogy and research at Oxford University, Green Templeton College. He's a former Wall Street executive from JP Morgan and teaches in China, Finland, France, and now also Mexico for the second time this year, right? If I remember correctly. So it's really a true pleasure having you here again, John. I really appreciate it. So and look forward to this presentation.
Well, I want to just say thank you once again, Dr. Larson. It's a pleasure working with you, and you're right. This is the second time we've done this, and I've always had a warm heart for UDLAP because I remember back in the day I met the Dean of Business years ago on the Great Wall of China, of all places, and that's where he introduced himself to me. And before everyone else joined, we here at NJCU are working very closely with the government of Mexico. We signed a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, about a week or so ago with the representative in the New York, I guess the New York consulate general came over here, and we're making a very big cooperation between Mexico and the United States, specifically NJCU, to further enhance our ability to teach our students here at NJCU, because we are traditionally a Hispanic serving institution in HSI. So Mexico is extremely important to us. So I just wanted to say that to let everybody know, Dr. Larson, why we're so interested. And I want to thank you for also teaching my students, because they're going to get a good kick out of that when you do that, I guess in about a month or so up here. But for everybody, today we'll talk a little bit about innovation and leadership. Now, my role at NJCU, as Dr. Larson had pointed out, as the management, the chair here, I have both the leadership graduate group under my control as well as the entrepreneurship group. And entrepreneurship and innovation and leadership have been very, very key to me. Now, I tend to mix innovation and entrepreneurship many times as we talk today, because entrepreneurs are innovators. You can't have one without the other. And as I go through the slide presentation, we will talk a little bit about that in more detail. And if for any reason I'm going too fast, just put up your hand and I'll slow down. Sometimes I tend to get really excited about the presentations, which I am about today. So I'm going to drive this, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things about what we're going to say today. It's when we look at the whole aspect of what is innovation? I mean, can we define it? Can we talk about it? We're seeing it so much around us right now due to what's happened in the last year and change with our world, where everybody now is trying to do things a little bit differently within the current environment. We're looking at leadership in general throughout the globe, and many leaders are stepping up to the plate, as we would say over here, and some are not. And we'll talk a little bit about, leadership and how does it tie into allowing for innovation. And then we'll wrap it up a little bit with questions and answers. But before that, we're going to pull it together and say, are innovators leaders and are leaders innovators? Are they mutually exclusive? Do they work together? So we'll talk a little bit about that and go through this. Any questions at any time, just jump in, put up your hand, and I'll be happy to answer them. Now, I like to put in a slide here. Now, when I did this presentation the first time, I didn't have the Bitcoin in the middle, because all of a sudden this thing is starting to really explode. I used to just have the $50 peso and the I think that's the $50 Liberty coin, USA Liberty coin. These are gold, and I'm associating with entrepreneurship and innovation with a monetary gain. many times you will get people that'll say, well, I'm trying to do something from a innovative aspect for society's benefit, that there might not necessarily be a monetary per se gain on it. But as we all know in business, unless we can quantify something from a business standpoint and put money behind it, it may not sell. I mean, it'd be a great idea, people may love it, but there needs to be a little bit of a monetization behind it somehow, so that if a new idea that's talked about by an entrepreneur or someone very innovative, but there's no monetary value behind it, it may not really sell. Now, let's talk about that thing in the middle there, that cryptocurrency, that Bitcoin I wanted to put in there. Obviously, this is just a image of it that doesn't exist. That's the fun part about this. Created by an entrepreneur or an innovator in Japan. Came up with an idea, as many of you know, and I'm not the greatest and knowledgeable on it, although my background was Wall Street in JP Morgan. We never had anything like that. JP's starting to put their arms around it, but think about the innovation behind that. It's a non-governmental monetary aspect. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's belonged to the groups of individuals that are mining these Bitcoins. It has a certain amount that will be, once it's hit, no more can be produced. I think there's about 70, maybe a little bit more percentage of those Bitcoins already mined out there. So it's amazing. In the US, it's about $60,000. I remember it when it was probably about 4,000. So I missed that boat, but I never could figure out what it was. So it took me forever to put my arms around it. But it's a very innovative thing. And think about the challenges of trying to get that thing done by an entrepreneur, because why? Banks have a hard time monetizing that. They're like, well, what is it? How do we sell it? How do we wrap our arms around it? They're starting to do that now. But for the longest time, because there was no regulations and things like that, they were concerned about. So it's just something that just to think about as an overarching theme here about innovation, and it can be risky, and not all innovators are successful. But a true entrepreneur can fail many, many times. And that's the difference between someone that has a great idea and tries it once and an entrepreneur. They just dust themselves off, come out with something else. So it's quite exciting, the whole aspect of it. Now, in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about a few what I would consider successful people, and I'll qualify why I'm utilizing them. And at some point, I'll talk about a few leaders. And I wanted to see, viewpoints and talk about this with folks. At the end, we will talk a little bit about breakup sessions. I think Dr. Larson might put us into a breakup session just on a couple of questions towards the end, just to discuss what you think. And it's all about hearing your ideas. Everything that I teach up here it's all about critical thinking. What do you think? What is your ideas on certain topics? So let's just talk about, we'll have a couple of what I consider successful Mexican entrepreneurs and a couple of successful USA entrepreneurs. And we'll just talk a little bit about them. And that there's a theme behind some of them. Now, Carlos Slim Hula is a made man, and he's worth about this is US, 77.2 billion. I just checked that. So it has been hovering around that since the beginning of 2021. I had Telmex, of course, and America Mobile, and he's what we consider a straight self-made individual, straightforward person. That's his philosophy in life, which I think is a great philosophy. When you look at some of these entrepreneurs who have gone into leadership roles, many of them, and he has as well, has a very philanthropy, gives back, made his money, made his skills noticed to the world, one of the most richest men in Mexico, if not in the world, and he's starting to give it back through his own foundations. Now, as we continue talking about another individual, Germán Lara Moda Velasco he's also a Mexican billionaire. I apologize for the typo. He's about 25 billion, in US. He owns copper mining. So that's something that was already there. When you think about the telecommunications that the gentleman before had, Carlos, it was more of a, coming with, at that time, something that was very new and just making it very successful in Mexico. Well, this was a copper mine, and copper mines obviously have been around for some times in Grupo Mexico. He has operations in Peru and in the U.S. as well. But Germán did a great job in at the moment continuing to mine copper. Now, from a an environmental standpoint, how will that happen, in the future? Will, when you think about copper and you think about any mining, it's pretty brutal on the environment. Well, he has to be very innovative to come up with new ways to be able to do that with less harm to the environment. I'm not talking about that specifically today, but these are things that these entrepreneurs and business folks need to think about. Because why? Because it's a resource that is like fossil fuel, eventually going to not exist. So what are they going to do after that? They always have to be thinking about the next step. Many of you know this individual. We call him the Sage of Omaha. I've known him for years. This is Warren Buffett. And Buffett, he's had certain philosophies over the years. And again, when you think about someone that's been successful, he's been successful for a very long time at doing something pretty unique when it comes to some of the entrepreneurs we've been talking about, successful business people. He's about $104 billion. So he's up there. I mean, Elon Musk has probably a lot more than that, 200 and change in billions, and Bill Gates probably is up there as well. But what Warren Buffett did, he created, instead of a business, he created what's called a conglomerate. At Berkshire Hathaway back in the day, he bought it. It was just a shirt manufacturer. It made shirts. And he turned that philosophy of one little company into conglomerates using not similar resources, not similar industries. So Berkshire Hathaway as an umbrella has a railroad, an elevator company, a chemical company, a large insurance company. Unlike resources on similar skill sets. Now that 100 and when you think about the amount of money that this guy has come up with, the 104.3 billion, he's given probably a large share of that to Bill Gates. I think he's about $190 billion US, but he gave about 90 to Bill Gates Foundation for the philanthropy foundation that Bill Gates, the former CEO of Microsoft, which again was another phenomenal, what we call radical innovation, coming up with Microsoft and putting it on everybody's laptop for free, an open source backbone. Why? Because everybody had it and they had to use his system to be able to become upgrades, etc. That was part of his system. So here's the last entrepreneur that we'll talk about for the moment. Now, this is Alice Walton, and she's probably the second most, I guess we'll call it, again, for want of a better word, richest, when I'm kind of associating these entrepreneurs, innovative, rich, with success. Walmart. Everybody's heard of Walmart. Walmarts are in most countries. And Sam Walton was the CEO, came up with the idea, and Alice was working hand in hand with him at the time that was created. And she's the second most wealthy woman in the world. The richest woman in the world, if I'm not mistaken, is might be Lancôme, might be the heiress to Lancôme, the French cosmetic firm. I believe she is the richest, and Ms. Walton is the second at 66.7. So I do believe the Walmart does give quite a bit of money to the charities as well. Might be under the Bill Gates Foundation, may not be. But these are individuals that have to think, especially with the Waltons. I mean, with Walmart, when we step back for 2 seconds and just think from an innovative standpoint and an entrepreneur standpoint, if we consider them still at that stage, the supply chain industry or supplying companies like Walmart is broken at the moment because there's so much disruption out there due to the fact that we've had this pandemic, in addition to the fact that the supply chain and certain logistics isn't working. And Walmart is probably 90% filled with what would be considered made in China products. And it was a book back in the day called Made in China. But Walmart is one of their biggest suppliers is from China. And they utilized that back in the day. They came up with a model saying, Walmart saying, of course, it's the factors of production in China are much better at labor and at natural resources than in the United States. Well, yeah, but now it's a problem. I mean, if you've ever been into a Walmart lately, and they're kind of hiding it because you don't really see it, but where there used to be maybe 8 aisles of products, now there's only 6. And they'll be stocked, but there's those 2 aisles that don't exist anymore. So instead of leaving unstocked shelves, they're just eliminating the actual hardware on the aisles to give the view that, oh no, we still got plenty of supply. Well, they're being decimated. A lot of their supplies are being halted because of the issues associated in the business community with what's going on in the pandemic. I mean, we can all tell our stories of something that's been disruptive because of what's happened in the pandemic, and the supply chain is probably one of the biggest I can think of right now. So you step back for a second. I tried to be an entrepreneur at one time, and you really have to have that certain policy, that certain tenacity. Back when I did my my graduate degree back in Miami in Florida, a team made a proposal to Southeast Bank at the time, and it was accepted on an entrepreneurship idea we had. We wanted to create a daycare center for children that were not, they may have a cold, they may have the sniffles, and those parents who utilize a daycare know that if your child goes to a daycare and they even look a little sick, they're going to be sent home. So what happens, the family, whoever the worker is, loses that ability to be at the job, and the job suffers from it. So we came up with this great idea, and it was very close to being accepted. It wasn't at the end, but we would have been given $1 million seed money. So, if you look at all of these different modules, we'll talk about this in a second, the team had many of them, but not all of them. And the reason why we didn't have all of them is once we were turned down, we kind of said, okay, so we went our separate ways. I went into Wall Street, and I don't know what happened to them, but an entrepreneur would say, okay, fine, I failed at one, so what? We'll do another one. And if that fails, we'll do another one. We'll do another one. So it's a mindset to it. So if you think about an entrepreneur, and you might see some of them, if you see on your family may be entrepreneurs, you may be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs, they have businesses, and we talk a little bit later about what's called small to medium businesses. And in Mexico, it's a very important industry backbone to labor, to people's monetary aspect, to the economy, to have small business or medium-sized businesses. You can be an entrepreneur in a large corporation, and corporations that when we talk a little bit about the leadership role, corporations that are very advanced in their ability, their corporate intelligence, such as JP Morgan, they allow people to be internal entrepreneurs to a business, and they give you that autonomy to do things. And I pretty much had that at JP Morgan, and we'll go over this a little bit. So let's just jump in for a couple of these are characteristics, primary characteristics, and you may see something on TV, or it might be some sort of a show where someone's making a pitch to either like an angel investor or a bank, or to you can go fund sourcing online. There's so many avenues that you can go. A venture capitalist to be able to get seed money for your business. At NJCU, we have competitions where we give students a small little prize. Because we're a public school and we don't have much money to dole out, but we also give it to the opportunity to students to reach out to the industry around us and possibly pitch their idea to some businesses that might have it. So these, when you think about an entrepreneur, think about the entrepreneurs you know. Think about the people that are in your life. You're going to see a little characteristic on each of these in that individual. The passion for business. Whenever I talk to someone that has an idea, I had this student, and she was really, really great. She had a in her own home, and she was from PR. She was from Puerto Rico, and she pitched, and she's successful at it. A bakery. She created a small bakery in her mother's apartment, and she had a beautifully done website. She had a list of folks that were actually interested in buying from her. And my role as her professor and as her mentor was, great, we've got to take it from your mother's apartment to a storefront, to a business front. And by doing that, we'll talk a little bit about the characteristics. You need certain things. Her passion for the business, it was just amazing. She would talk about this business as if it was the greatest cupcake factory or bakery in the world. And whenever she talked to me about it, my mouth would salivate. I was like, oh my God, it sounds so delicious. All of the things that she wanted to produce. Her passion was amazing. Any entrepreneur that you talk to will be passionate about their business. Let's give you an example of who aren't entrepreneurs. Not picking on any particular school, but if I go out to the front office here, chances are I'll hear people saying how much they can't stand being at their job. They'd rather be home, they'd rather be with their children. I don't want to be here. You're not going to hear that from an entrepreneur. They love what they're doing. They do, and they really, you feel it. So I could tell that a lot of my folks around me are not entrepreneurs, but when I see them, they're amazing. And when you think about the entrepreneurial business, it's really also about not only my product that I'm creating, but my customers that I'm satisfying. And the importance of being innovative in this world is the type of customers we have today. The customers today are extremely demanding. They are very intelligent, and they're from many, 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 many walks of life, many different demographics, and they're international. They're everywhere. And that's the thing about today's society. Think about the innovation of what we're going through right now. I'm online talking to UDLAP, where 2 years ago I might have had to, which I would have loved to have done, I would have had to go down there and talk, and I would love to have, but now it's through Zoom or through some sort of a platform that we can do online. Many of the courses in your school right now, if not all of them, are online. And in my school, 50% are online. So this never happened before. We had faculty and professors that didn't want to have online because they weren't customer focused. They weren't sure about who their customer was. And some people say students are the customer. So a student wants to be able to take that modality of that class wherever he, she, or they are, and to have them to come into the school. When they don't want to, they'd prefer it online. We weren't satisfying that need. But lo and behold, the pandemic came, and all those faculty that said, we can never teach online, it's not an online class. Well, they had to teach online. Everything was turned overnight online. And that was the success about this whole program, that when you take away something that was beneficial to a terrible situation, is the fact now that we can think about how online academia, online degrees will work in a traditional, brick and mortar, knock on wood, brick and mortar environment. They weren't focused on their customer. Now, all entrepreneurs are focused on their customer. They need to know, you need to hear what's going on. And I started my career in sales. A quiet customer is a bad customer, because when you have a quiet customer and you think, one example, and this happened to me, I never went back to a particular client because, oh, when they're quiet, nothing's going wrong. So I went back to them for a major reorder, and I was like, hi, how are you? So should we go down the road and maybe have lunch and talk about our products going forward? And they were like, well, John, thank you so much, but since we never heard from you, we went in a different direction. And I was like, whoa, is there anything we can do? And they were like, John, thank you. You did a great job, but we're going in a different direction. Well, I lost a customer. Why? Because I thought by them being quiet, they were happy. Apparently they weren't. So it's always good to give a little shout out to your clients and are customer focused. You need to understand, who are your customers? How do I satisfy them? What do they want? I had a meeting this morning with some of the faculty in charge of general education, because we're a school of business. We work hand in hand with the general education. And they're trying to ask right now the students, well, what type of general ed classes do you want? Do you want history? Do you want dance? Do you want theater? Do you want music? What do you want? So they're going to try to put more programs around what students are looking for. So I thought that was pretty innovative. Now, when we talk a little bit more about successful, now these are successful. Again, going back in my day at Southeast, when we tried to pitch this daycare, we call it sniffles and sneezes, because kids were sneezing and sniffling, and it didn't go over. Our tenacity was, we tried and we just gave up. Failure is okay. And I tell that to my students. A manageable failure is okay. Manageable risk is okay. Entrepreneurial spirit is fine. They fail all the time. And you know what they're doing? They're thinking about their next success. Now, in JP Morgan, and if you're in a business and you're saying, well, if I fail, I'm in trouble. Well, if it's a manageable risk that you've taken, and and we'll talk about leadership in a little bit, about the types of leaders there are out there. If your team, your management team, the leadership in your firm is what we consider a transformational leadership, meaning that they're high emotional intelligence of the individuals, then chances are they'll say, well, listen, John, learn from what you made a mistake on. Try not to let it happen again, but keep thinking about new ideas, because we are in the business for creating some products or some service. And the same old, as they say, isn't working anymore. It's a different world. There's so many connectivity on the international globe, as you can see from talking to you in Dr. Larson's course and Dr. Larson coming to me in my course. We're all connected. So failure is acceptable, and you do something, learn from it, and move on. Now, the execution intelligence. My dear student from Baker, where she was failing miserably is that she didn't have a plan to take it out of her mother's apartment into a storefront. Because online, you need to, even if it was an online bakery, you need to bake somewhere. Her capacity to be able to satisfy her customers was being diminished, because the more business she got, the less capacity she was able to have, because there's only a certain amount of space in a small apartment, right? So I helped her, and I am helping her now, creating a very detailed, refined business plan. Because when you go to a venture capitalist, when you go to an angel investor, they're going to ask for a pitch. And that pitch is going to be just like I'm doing right now. It'll be a deck that we call a deck of the idea and a business plan. And that business plan is detailed enough to tell that investor, potential investor, what they are looking for money-wise, what their idea for growth is, what their expenses are, what their risk capacity is, and what their structure is going to look like. I mean, if you're going to give out $100,000 or 1,000,000 pesos, you want to make sure that it's successful to a degree that you're going to get a big return on it if it's successful. And most of these angel investors, when no harm, no foul, they give you seed money, and if it fails, you don't owe them anything. Most of them are like that. But if it's successful, whoa, You owe them a chunk of change of your product. I mean, look at the detail on those agreements that you're signing. You're turning over quite a bit of your revenue if it's successful. But you need money. Maybe a bank is too difficult. Maybe in today's society right now, banks are just holding on to the liquidity of their money. I don't know. But these are the things just to keep thinking of as you're going through this. There is a tremendous knock-on effect of a successful entrepreneur and entrepreneurial firms. The importance to a society is immense. These small to medium-sized firms are many times the backbone of society's ability to grow. When you look at firms like the Waltons, who created Walmart, a little bit of background on them, they go in and they just destroy everything around them because that's their model. Their model is to look at in an area that's not successful, that has low taxes, cheap real estate, and build something there. And those small to medium companies that are not actually suppliers to Walmart, if they're competition to Walmart, they will get eliminated. And I kid you not, I've seen it over and over and over. But that's their model, and it's been successful. But you can't harm too many of these small to medium. Why? Because they bring revenue, they bring taxes, they give people products, they give individuals jobs, and they're really important. And when you look at countries, for instance, Mexico, many, and we'll give you some statistics in a little bit, very high percentage of these, what we'll call SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. Very important. They could be a family-run business. They could start out as a family-run business, expand to bringing in students from schools, giving money to charities. Very, very important. So when you look at small and you look at how these firms are creative, one statistics, these are all 2021 statistics. It's more, in my opinion, smaller firms are a little bit more agile. They're easier to maneuver. And when you talk about patents or any regulation or the creation of something, small firms have a little bit more flexibility. They're a little bit more, they can move. Their agility is much, much easier. Think about a large firm as a big cruise ship in a port. And small to medium-sized entrepreneurs are small little yachts or small little vessels. They can turn very, very fast. Well, these big boats take forever. And it takes years sometimes. Even in academia, it takes years to get programs through because we're really big. But this is a public entity, a public institution, whereas a private school might have it a little bit easier to get programs through because they have less regulation, theoretically less regulations. Now, let's talk about job creation. Here's some pretty big statistics, some of them from 220, and the full depth and breadth of 21 has not been defined yet, so a lot of these are from Stata, and Stata is pretty good when it comes to legitimate information on that. So small businesses, we'll talk a little bit about the U.S. at the moment. In the U.S., small businesses account for a tremendous amount of net new jobs, tremendous amount of ability to employ individuals. The problem that happened with the pandemic here in the United States and why our economy is in such bad shape up here is because many of these small businesses closed up. I'm about 15 minutes from Manhattan, New York City, proper New York City. It's right across the river. I see it every day. You would see store after store after store closed, boarded up. And I felt so bad about that because those are the job creations. Those are important to society. And they were closed because, number one, they had to close because they couldn't serve customers, and they were unable to regain their ability. So not only are small businesses highly agile, but they're also very vulnerable. And a lot of them fail. high statistics, high probability that a small business will fail within the first 2 years. But you keep, entrepreneurs keep doing it, innovators keep doing it. Now, if we look at 2.12 million SME businesses, I thought that was a small number, but that's exactly what the data is showing, which is, I thought, bigger, but apparently it isn't. That's what it is. So that's a lot of businesses, but I thought it was a little bit smaller than that would. I thought there was billions of these SMEs, but apparently there isn't. I guess how you define it. I guess there's certain criteria, certain thresholds in here that they would have to define as what qualifies for a small to a medium-sized business, statistically, people-wise, and revenue-wise, probably. Now, the Office of Economic Control, EOCD, in their scorecard said there are 4 million small and medium-sized in Mexico, of which 97.4% are micro enterprises. They're tiny little enterprises. Might be a small family shop, might be a small business, and that represents 12.4% of the TGP, which is a very big amount of money. And look at that, 47.2% of the workforce. It's so important in Mexico, but other countries as well. I'm talking about Mexico, obviously, because we're working together very closely with Mexico, and I do a lot of research on Mexico. But the fact is that they're a tremendous benefit. And when you look at the Canada, the United States, and Mexico, let's see, United States, Mexico, USMCA. I always have to. It used to be NAFTA, and I always have to do the acronym in my head. Well, that's now it's I don't know how effective it is, because I know they've been realigning these, but small businesses will be impacted on both sides of the states and Mexico, based upon the freedom, the ability to move without regulations, without almost a tax incentive to be able to move it. And I know a lot of the large businesses in the United States have smaller little businesses in Mexico to help them to finish a product, finish a car, or finish some material that they're building and selling here in the United States. Well, some of it will be finished. So there's a lot of working jointly working with the workforce, which is very important for our neighbor and your neighbor as well, to be able to work hand in hand. And this is the picture of Stata. I just wanted to show what it looked like. And it levels off again at 2020, because we haven't gotten any of the updates yet. But basically, it's showing about 213, 212.98 specifically on the entrepreneurial firms. So quite a bit of firms out there, and quite a bit of revenue and jobs and assistance to society out there, especially when they're more on this new green. That's another opportunity for innovation, is the impact of green technology and green entrepreneurship within our societies. That's a major ability now to do something new that's also providing an impact to our society. When I talk to a lot of my students here, the old axiom was that you're in the business to make money. Well, that's changed. People are in the business to, yes, sure, they have to make a profit, but it's also that what impact does it have on society? What impact does it have on the environment, on people, etc.? So a lot of these small businesses now are looking towards the green impact, and quite a bit of an opportunity that are there for these individuals. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We still are doing good. I might speed this up a little bit. So when you think about impact on society, again, it's quite a dramatic impact on society. When you think about all the small businesses around you, if they weren't there, one of the biggest things that really hurt businesses in the city of Manhattan, in New York City during the pandemic, and a lot of big businesses opened up, there was no food. There was those little shops that made food. They had food trucks, little trucks that go on food on the road. They didn't exist. They were shut down. So a lot of people were impacted, and a lot of people didn't want to go to work, right? Because the first thing they said, well, I can't buy any food. There's no places around us. And when you think about probably Mexico City, I haven't been there in a while, but I used to go to Mexico City, and in Manhattan, food is everywhere. And it's part of the society for restaurants and entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurial hospitality management is a very, very, very big part. So again, impact on society. How is it making our lives easier? Think about the technology. We'll talk a little bit about this with our smartphone. I mean, it's been around for forever, people would say at this stage, but it's what's the next radical innovation? I keep thinking to myself. We'll talk about Apple in a little bit, but Apple came up with that. Steve Jobs back in the day came up with the phenomenal innovative idea of coming up with this technology. What's the next radical innovation? Will it be more artificial intelligence? Will it be more robotics? And these are things that companies in Mexico, companies in the United States are thinking about right now and planning for, and they're building technology around that. It's very important. Could be small entrepreneurs that are helping larger entrepreneurs. These things, they all work hand in hand. Because when you think about the impact on a larger firms, a lot of the products and services that they work with are with the larger firms. When you think about models out there, especially in management, Michael Porter's 5-force model, when he came up, Michael Porter, when he came up with this idea of how sustainability can be maintained in a business, part of it was, what's the, or his diamond theory, what's the supporting resources around us, or what's the competition around us? Well, entrepreneurs, the smaller firms, the SMEs, are not going to be a major competitor to a Pepsi Cola or something to that effect, or a Coca-Cola, but they're going to supply things to the products that are necessary to produce Coca-Cola, to produce Pepsi Cola. So the supporting industry of an entrepreneurship is around them by having these small SMEs around the production plants of those soda manufacturers or water manufacturers, whatever they are now. But the competition isn't really around them. There aren't any new soda companies that are on that scale and that breadth that are popping up. You have these little micro places popping up all over the place, micro breweries. And think about innovation. Let's talk a bit about what happened during the pandemic. I mean, when we talk about, this is where the supply chain got devastated in the United States. This simple little piece of paper, it's really simple. It's just a mask, really simple. Well, we are told that we have to wear these all the time up here, which we do. We have to wear them in class. We have to wear them in the hall. The United States outsourced the majority of this work to China because it wasn't part of their plan to have that made in the United States. Well, when the pandemic came, what happened? I had to get my mask from I taught in China for the past 5 years, from my students, from my friends in China, to send them to me. Before, I think China said you couldn't do that, but I know in Thailand you can't, because I've got students in Thailand as well. They couldn't send those to me. But someone in the United States said, well, wait a minute, we're producing shirts, we're producing sweaters. Why can't we just change and produce some of these? And they did. How about breweries? You know the stuff you put on your hands, that spray that has alcohol? Certain distilleries, for vodka or for whatever alcohol you like, certain breweries, they said, wait a minute, why don't we create some of these products? Why? To help society. So the innovation that was spawned from this disaster is still around us. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments as well. So think about this always, the impact on how large firms help society with innovative ideas in business is just amazing. Speaking of which, when we talk a little bit about the entrepreneurship and innovation in firms, we're talking about the response to the pandemic. And I look at these 4 entrepreneurial type things, in the Trendsetter, Trailblazer, the Adapter, and the Optimizer. And this is a typical diagram where you have in the upper right-hand coordinate, you have the highest impact one. That's the most sustainable and the one that occurred after the pandemic. That's the Trendsetter. And in the Trendsetter, we'll talk about, what was created. Companies that respond to the crisis by developing a new product line that will continue going forward. Those are the folks that in the business world that saw a need for something new, not just thought about it and implemented it. Those are the ones that in today's society you call trendsetters, and they're pretty amazing. They're really amazing. When you look at the other side, when you look at an optimizer, it's just kind of like it's temporary. They're just fixing it. An adapter. Think about an adapter. Let me tell you what happened in New York City quickly. An adapter is a restaurant. Restaurants in New York City for the longest time were not allowed to have anyone inside the restaurant. All they could do was take out. So when you think about that, what did they do? Well, these restaurants were allowed to build little huts outside their restaurants because they were technically not in the restaurant. They were outside the restaurant. That was very innovative. So they adapted to the problems that were currently happening. But the problem with those were that once society went back into the restaurants where we're allowed to go in with your passport, it's called your vaccine passport, they're still there. So what was once a loved item, it's now an eyesore because they're taking up real estate. And the places that they plop these huts were usually in the middle of the street. So cars had to go around them. It's amazing. If you go to Manhattan, you'll see them all over the place. And they were there to serve the purpose because they were outside the restaurant. And because they were outside the restaurant, they didn't have to qualify for that, what they could require of people inside the restaurant. So that was very innovative. So these are just some quadrants that you might want to think about when you're talking about different individuals. Now, I did this once before, and I wanted to get it again because I want to get a little bit different perspective on this. So what makes a good leader and what's good leadership style? So what we'll do now is, time-wise, I think I'm okay, Dr. Larson, I think I'm good here for a few more discussions. So we'll talk a little bit about both in the U.S. and in Mexico about some folks that are leaders. And I normally don't talk politician. I never talk politician, but they're very, very obvious. The two people I'm going to talk about. And let me first go to we'll talk about them in a minute. Here, let me go with this. I just want to set certain things up. Let me give you a little bit more criteria. When you think about a leader, many of us have our own views of who we feel are leaders. We could be considered what would be considered a follower. For me, for John Donnellan, I look for someone that's very ethical. I like ethical individuals. I like people that I can trust. I also like people that I understand if I'm going to be influenced by them. Now, I don't look at on Facebook or on any social media these influencers. I don't. An influencer to me is someone who's actually helped society, who's ethically sound. I don't know who these individuals are, but they're called influencer. And maybe in today's marketplace, that's something that's important. And I respect the fact that they're there. I may not necessarily follow them. But when you think about people who are in this world, we all have our own views on. Could be family members, could be in the religious community, could be in the political community, could be in the business, or even in academia. Many of you might look at Dr. Larson as someone like to follow. He's the leader. Why? Because he's what's called a legitimate leader. He has that doctoral knowledge, in a professor in a good-sized, well-respected university. Well, that has a lot of respect behind it. So it depends on who you wish to have. But keep in mind, a leader may not be a manager, and a manager may not be a leader. In business, what I'm teaching up here is business, more on the management side. Management can be anything. It could be in the arts. You could be in the arts field. You could be in the music industry. You could be in the science industry. You could be in any industry. There needs to be some management theory to manage what's going on. It's theoretically a business. Even a school is a business. Don't let them tell you it isn't. We're a business. So when you think about a manager, Well, managers may not be a good leader. A manager is someone who may be able to manage what a leader came up with. And we'll talk about Steve Jobs in a second. I met Steve Jobs years ago before, he passed away, God rest his soul, years ago. But he was a great innovator. He was a good leader of Apple. He was replaced by this current CEO, and that is Cook, Tim Cook, and if I'm not mistaken. And he's a great manager of Apple. Because when you think about Apple, you think about what they've done after the Steve Jobs era. They've refined. They probably had maybe an Apple 4 or an Apple 5 by the time this is an Apple 12, I think, or 11. It's 12. That's the newest one. So the management role of Cook was able to enhance the current product that a leader developed. A leader is an innovator, develops things, inspires people. Now, I'm not saying Steve Jobs was a great leader, because we'll talk about him in a second. Because as far as a leadership role, you have to have certain qualities. And he was a little difficult person to work with. But Cook is a very good to society. He's very much his role out there in trying to be inclusive in society is well documented and very respected. So he has some great things. But those of you who follow Apple will realize that, when's the next radical innovation? It's kind of been the same old, different variations of it over the past X amount of years. So when you think about who your leaders are and who your managers are, this could be mutually exclusive. Some managers are not great leaders. A lot of leaders are not great managers. I mean, there's some leaders I'd love to follow, but boy, I wouldn't want them to manage me because they're terrible. There's a lot of managers there I respect because they get the business done, but I don't consider them in my role of leadership. Now, this is just a Venn diagram. It's just showing you there's really no intersection at this point of this. It could be more of a task to take away for a group to work on. Where is the intersection of leadership followers and the situation? Well, again, leadership are based on the personality of an individual. Many of the time you look at someone, you're like, wow, this individual's charismatic, phenomenal ability to lecture and speak. And I trust this individual. Awesome. And that's based upon as a follower, my values, my norms. My values are very, very much set in the fact that I really respect people of high ethical and moral standards. Important for me. But as the case, the situation, in situational, situational management is another theory out there. Sometimes the situation calls for someone who is maybe an individual you wouldn't necessarily want, but they have the right skills at that right moment for that right situation to do all these things. Back in the day, you had a phenomenal situational leader in Winston Churchill. He failed miserably after World War II because he was good at that particular situation to basically save London. My father was Irish. My father was in London during the bombing of London, and he always tells me the stories about what happened over there. So that's a story from someone who was in their family who was over in London. Regardless of what those may think that Churchill has done and hasn't done, my perspective is from my father, who was literally there. So these are things that you can talk a little bit about. And here are some of the things about all the fun stuff about a leader. And when I say these, you're going to know them. We have had autocratic leaders. I like to use this expression, it's my way or the highway, meaning that if, I'm not even sure I respect your ideas, John, you're going to do it this way. And they're not fun to work for. They're not fun. And to be honest with you, they're all around me here at the school. I hope this isn't being taped. If it is, Dr. Larson, I'm in big trouble. But they're everywhere.
Yeah, I'll say that afterwards.
Thank you. Zap that out. But you gotta be honest here. They're all around. And a transactional leader is, again, they're not bad people. A transactional leader says, well, you're making a good salary, just do the job. Well, a person in today's society, it's more than monetary, although monetary is important. You want a leader that's going to make them feel respected, feel enthusiastic. Motivational theory, think about that. my motivational theory isn't monetary at this stage. It's more to be acceptance, more brought into the situation. That motivates me. Monetary doesn't at this stage. And then you have a democratic leader, someone who can't make a decision. It's asking everybody to make a decision for them. And in a country such, Mexico and the United States is pretty high up when it comes to Hofstede for individualism. You like to have people like to make the decisions themselves. I don't want to have 15 people telling me their opinion and then getting a joint consensus. And I'm not being autocratic. I look at what's the best. I share it with them to see if everything's good, and then I go that way. But asking for everybody on a design, it's like the old expression, you get a group of people together to design a horse and they design a camel. I mean, it's too many individuals. Then a laissez-faire, which is not the greatest, that they just say, okay, I don't want to know how you do it, just do it. Just get it fixed. You ever had someone say that to you? I've had that said to me so many times. Listen, John, I don't care the details, get it fixed. Okay. And then it doesn't get fixed, and they come back to me and they start saying, well, why didn't it get fixed? Well, you didn't know the details, and I needed your assistance on something. And here's the best one. They're rare, they're out there, and when you get a hold of one of these individuals, hold on to them. A transformational leader. Transformational leaders are those individuals that will look at the big picture, understanding what needs to be done, and at the same time valuing every individual person working with them, not only in that particular role, but valuing them to the point of how can this person be moved up to get that person more involved? How can I get individuals more successful? Because at the end of the day, a transformational leader is probably saying, my role is based upon how each and every one of you have succeeded in business. I look at it like that in academia. I look at some of my students down the road years from now that come back to me and they say, Dr. Donnellan, we want to thank you, Professor. We're successful in this industry, and I always go back to a particular class. When someone says that to me, that makes my year. It makes me happy because I influenced a person, influencing, and who's successful. So I feel that I've raised that person's ability, and that's a transformational leader. We'll talk a little bit about, get some of your opinions in a few seconds. But so when we come back to, does good entrepreneurship make for good leaders? My answer is, well, sometimes it doesn't. And let's talk a little bit about some individuals here, and I know there's 4 questions I'm going to ask. One of them would be about your Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. And I was telling Dr. Larson that there is a little rumor that because we've just signed an MOU with Mexico, that your president, El Presidente, might come to the United States to visit us, and that would be quite an honor. And obviously, he has quite a bit of a background. He's knowledgeable in leadership, and I'll just put that out there to you because you probably see this individual, see the policies affecting you from this individual. And the question is that I'm going to break you out. We still have a few moments. I'm going to quickly go through this. What is his leadership style? So what's the president of Mexico's leadership style? And I'll talk to you about my president now. Remember, we had those 4 leadership styles. This is Joe Biden, and Joe is the 46th president. And he is, what's his style? Just a little bit about him. He doesn't talk much. You don't see him giving presentations or speeches. He doesn't answer any questions. So really enjoyable being an American at the moment and United States citizen in this particular environment. So think about his leadership. His leadership is kind of like a laissez-faire in a sense, but there's other things involved in there, and that's something I'm going to ask you about. And we can talk about that in the breakout session. Now, there's 2 politicians. Let's talk about 2 entrepreneurs. I met Steve Jobs after he got fired from Apple. I met him down in Miami because I was doing my graduate school in Miami, and I got a job down in Miami in the early 90s. And he was the chairman of something called Next. After they fired him from Apple, the chairman of the board of directors felt he wasn't where they wanted to be, and they fired a brilliant man like him. But he was a very difficult person to work with. He was very difficult. And one of his ideas was, this is a much larger Apple phone that Tim Cook and company came up with. Steve Jobs wanted the much smaller one, which is about that big. So about half of this, a third of it, is not his idea. It was like, well, we came up with this phone and we want it to be like this. Very, very particular about his ideas, but he was good at it, and he was an innovator, and he, and great orator. When you listen to him talk, he was really good, but just a very difficult person to work with. So what type of a leadership style does he have? Last person we'll talk about here is Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk goes to space. He flies all over the place. Tesla is one of the companies that he developed. And again, it's new technology. When Tesla first came out with the whole theme about batteries, I was very skeptical about it, because I knew from the other electrical cars that were being manufactured, and there were others, he wasn't the first to come out with it, there was that limitation. And in the United States, because we are it's a big country, just like Mexico is, you need something that's going to get you across the country with little or no trouble of having to regenerate it or charge the batteries. Well, it just didn't work with the old cars. His cars are much more efficient in that respect. The whole system is totally different. They're very expensive. But he came up with that. He also is, as we speak right now, boring a hole, I think, in Las Vegas to California or something like that, a tunnel. So he has a boring company, and he's from South South Africa. He's a South African, and he came to the United States and made his fortune over here. And he's over $219 billion worth of, which is money. And at that stage, it's just monopoly. It's just play money. I mean, I can't even think about what $219 billion would look like, but he apparently does. So what is a very good visionary? What was his leadership style? So I think for the next breakout room, maybe for 10 minutes, I don't know, Professor, are we good to do that for maybe 10 minutes?
Not
if
sure.
not, I'll just.
Yeah, we're supposed to finish in 10. So.
Okay, well, don't worry. What we'll do is, why don't we just do this? Why don't I just ask the audience right now?
Yeah.
What out from the questions or the preguntas, what type of leadership style do you think, say, first off, your the president has?
I can make a survey so people can answer that.
Okay, that would be nice, and then I'll just recap on each one of these and turn it over for a few minutes of questions and answers. It should only take us about 4 minutes to do it the most. So it'll be President Obrador, Biden, Musk, and Jobs. Each of them has, just put all 4 of them together if you would.
Not sure how to do that. I'm thinking I'll do first Lopez Obrador.
You choose.
Just do like the 5 options.
Yeah. Okay. If you can't do all of them, Professor, just choose one of them.
Okay.
And we'll just, as an example, talk about that individual.
Okay.
And why the group thinks that.
Okay. I'll do this.
I'll leave it up to you.
I'll do Elon Musk.
Okay. We'll have his picture up as we talk. And as you answer the questions, he puts together. It's not under an umbrella of one company like Berkshire Hathaway. He actually puts it together as many different views. So we have the majority is transformational, and I agree with you. I agree with the transformation. Let's talk a little bit about, from an autocratic standpoint. He doesn't fit that role, because he's well respected in what he does, and he does have the ability for people to buy into his dreams and his visions. Think about this: an electrical car, a spaceship, and a boring company. Where's the synergy between the 3 of these things? Unlike business, unlike non-similar resources, non-similar business entity. So I think the winner here would be the transformational, and I definitely agree with with the folks here. The autocratic, he probably has to get people's buy-in on that. Although it's a good choice, the one that came up with autocratic. Some CEOs, and I've worked with a few. I worked with Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. I also work with the CEO from Bob Goulden from Prudential Financial, and they were both accessible. I could talk to them, but they were kind of like it was their way. But transactional, again, people are getting tremendous amount of money for these ideas that they're coming up with. So the transactional aspect of it is, although it does sound like it's possible, probably it's more towards a transformational. But good point also on the autocratic transaction.
Doctor, if you want to, I could just can refresh the question and put the other names up there, and so you'll see that.
Okay, you want, sure. Let me. Okay.
Quick if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just do.
So in that one, I give
the
class 100%. Yep. AMLO. I've learned to realize his nickname is.
Yeah.
Do you pronounce it AMLO or is it just AMLO?
AMLO. AMLO.
AMLO. Gotcha.
So what do you think, people? What do you think about AMLO? What style would that be? You have it up there, right?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Nobody's answering.
So it's 37 individuals in the audience, and no one's actually responding yet.
No, but okay, so they can't see it. Okay.
They can't. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
High responsive.
That's weird. Okay.
Let me go up to the top. It looks good to me.
Okay. Yeah.
You have to clear
try it again.
Clear it
Let me see. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Now it's working.
There we go. And in this one, I might need a class to tell me a little bit about these individuals.
Yeah.
With AMLO. There's a pattern coming by. I can see a pattern developing here. Quite interesting. Well, if we look at the responses, and they're trickling in right now, we are seeing that the leader is a tendency to be autocratic, meaning it's when you think about an autocratic, yes, there's a big jump right now. Yes, autocratic has taken the lead. It's a big. So the second would be democratic. But when you think about autocratic for a president, that's it's tough to, I guess, be a president of a very large, diverse country as Mexico. But I probably would not want an autocratic president. I would want someone that listens a little bit more to me. I would not want a laissez-faire, because disasters happen when you have someone that doesn't get involved in anything like that. Nobody does. Yeah. I got who put Democrat. Marcio, 7 people are actually there. Well, I'm getting a good lesson. This is the second time I put him up, and all I can say is I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And when's your next election? So you got Musk.
Joe Biden also.
Oh, Joe.
That's a tough one.
Uncle Joe, as we call him up here. Well, he did want to race it. Wow. Thank you, Mauricio. Yeah. When I look at that Joe Biden and just things speak for themselves. You don't necessarily need to be a politician or a citizen in the United States. Just look at the United States and see what's happening. It's falling apart. There's just too much strife, too much inflation, and it all goes back to the person in charge. And he listens to probably a small group of people. Houseplant. There's probably a small group of people out there that actually give him their opinion and that he listens to them. And it's not inclusive. This country is basically, like most countries, a at three party system at the most, and he's pretty much focused on. Not only is he focused on being a Democrat, but he's also a Democrat. So he's missing a few people. It's missing 50% of the population. So the last but not least, why don't we try with Steve Jobs now?
Sure.
And I think we're going to we're actually going out on time. This is good. Your responses. I love your responses, by the way. Now, when it comes to Steve Jobs, again, when you think about the individual, people that were around him became billionaires. Like Wozniak, I think, was one of the people if I'm not mistaken, I think that was either Bill Gates, I think it was Steve Jobs, who were very, very successful. So what we're seeing here is that there is a strong trend for having a transformational leader. Now, just a little bit about Steve Jobs. He was very difficult to work with. And normally a transformational leader will be someone that is giving you lots of praise, makes you feel very motivated. And he probably had to be at some point a transformational leader to come up with the innovative ideas that his ideas or his group's ideas that were actually implemented by other individuals. And to the extent that another CEO, Tim Cook, can manage this company, and it's still a phenomenal investment, phenomenal company. So he's autocratic. He was a little autocratic. He was a little transactional. Definitely was not democratic. He definitely was not laissez-faire. So I think the class, again, Professor, your class is on top of this. So I think they get an A in this particular response of all these categories. So well done. Hand clap to the class.
That's great.
Well done. So, Professor, I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to you if there's any questions or anything you would like me to wrap this up with.
Yeah, exactly. We have a minute here if somebody has a question. That'll be fine. One last question. Thanks a lot for the presentation, also, Dr. Noah.
You're welcome, and I do hope to come down to see your students and to see UDLAP. It's a shame that we can't. So from a what's happened in society standpoint, I appreciate the fact that we can do these online, but I also miss face-to-face as well.
Yeah.
Some of the things
people are kind of. I know that people have other classes and everything, so I guess nobody wants to have questions here. But if students, if you have questions, I mean, you can also, if you want to mail me or something, I can probably forward something, So, but if I'm promising too much here, but.
Well, Professor, you can give them my email address if you want, Professor. Please do, and I'll be more than happy to answer. And I thank you very much, Professor, for allowing me. And thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thanks.
Great class.
That was fascinating. That was really interesting. And that we have an exchange program also. We have some kind of with New Jersey if you want to go up there and study more with them. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna close there, and thank you so much again. It was really nice seeing you, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Professor. I look forward to it, and thank you everybody on the line. You're a great audience, and I appreciate your great questions. Thank you so much. Now, bye everybody. Bye.